Welcome back to the afternoon sessions, everyone. We really hope that you enjoyed the first half of our conference and that you had a really good lunch. My name is Katelyn and I'm one of the professional advisors with the Rights Respecting Schools team. So as you can see for this afternoon, there are also lots of exciting sessions coming up, including campaigning, a fantastic panel discussion where you'll get to hear about excellent rights respecting practice in schools, an update on our new Spotlight resource, and a guest appearance that Martin hinted at earlier. We hope that you'll be able to stay with us for the rest of the afternoon and join in with the chat, the Q&A, and all of the Menti polls later on. Our first presentation of the afternoon is going to explore safeguarding and tackling child-on-child abuse through the framework of children's rights. Safeguarding and protecting children and young people is fundamental to what we do, making children's rights a living, breathing part of school life. It was really good to see some of the references to safeguarding showing up in our last Menti poll, asking which aspects of school life are enhanced by the knowledge of rights. And we all know how absolutely vital it is. Our session will start with Sarah Lancaster, Director of Safeguarding here at UNICEF UK, who will present UNICEF's work in this area in relation to the UK context. Then we'll hear a case study from one of our gold secondary schools, Comberton Village Collage, who have implemented an effective programme of safeguarding underpinned by children's rights. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today at your conference. I'm really pleased to be here. And I just wanted to take a moment, I suppose, just to reflect on safeguarding and how that interfaces with children's rights and the importance of making sure that we're kind of looking at our safeguarding practices through a rights lens, because it helps us enhance the way that we embed safeguarding across everything that we do. So safeguarding here at UNICEF UK, if we can scoot along one slide, that would be amazing. Thank you. So as the custodians of the UNCRC, we embed the general principles and articles of the UNCRC in everything that we do. And we know that no one article is more important than another, but I think when we think about safeguarding and child protection, obviously the main article that springs to mind is Article 19 of the UNCRC, and that's about, children's right to feel safe and to be protected and nurtured and free from all forms of violence and harm. And I think when we start to think about safeguarding through a rights-based lens, something magical happens, because it gives us another kind of language to use when we think about safeguarding, and it helps us to focus on a child's rights approach to safeguarding. It helps us put the child at the centre of our decision making, and it helps us understand the evolving capacity of children when we're navigating quite complex safeguarding landscapes. On to the next slide for me, please. So just to kind of, I think this slide sums it up in terms of, when we're working within safeguarding, our absolute aim is to promote and protect the well-being and safety of all children that we come into contact with. And it's about how we involve children in that decision-making process when we're going through a process of keeping them safe, and how their voices are heard, and how we're taking a rights-based approach to that, so that the best interests of children are at the forefront of our decision making. And I think when we look at some of the challenges that you have across schools and education establishments, your safeguarding landscape is a very complex one to navigate, and I think sometimes that can feel incredibly overwhelming. But when we start to look at safeguarding through a rights-based approach, I think it helps to just kind of unpack some of it, and it helps to give you a common language that you can use to approach what is quite a complex landscape. Next slide, please. So thinking about kind of how we use children's rights when we think about safeguarding, it helps to create this shared language and common understanding, and it's a mechanism as well to help children understand safeguarding, because I think if we speak to most people about safeguarding, sometimes not everybody fully understands actually what it means when we talk about safeguarding. But actually, if you use the articles and you use the language of the Convention of the Rights, it starts to give it meaning, and it starts to help unpick actually what we mean when we talk about safeguarding. It provides foundations for children to express themselves and have a voice, which is really important. And it's really important to acknowledge and understand children's evolving capacity, and actually, you know, they have a right to be heard, and they have a right to be involved in some of the decision making around what they feel they need to keep them safe. It helps to break down what safeguarding is and supports effective implementation of safeguarding practices. And it supports the creation of a child-centred and holistic safeguarding approach, which is really, really important, because I think as safeguarding practitioners, you know, absolutely we're governed by legislation and we're governed by processes, but it's about bringing it back to that really kind of child-centred approach and looking at things in a very holistic way, which is so, so important. And it also supports the co-creation of safeguarding practices and mechanisms. So it allows, you know, what can be quite jargonistic, legislative and technical kind of frameworks to be broken down into child-friendly versions and to support that co-creation of what that looks like. So it really helps us to kind of strengthen our safeguarding practices, and it really helps us to just look at things from a slightly different angle. And, you know, the kind of safeguarding and children's rights go hand in hand. You know, safeguarding, effective and robust safeguarding practices absolutely uphold children's rights, and children's rights absolutely give us a tool to make sure that our safeguarding practices are robust. So they're really intrinsically linked. Next slide, please. And so what I wanted to do now is to just kind of put it into a bit more of context in terms of what's happening across the UK, because I think, you know, schools and education settings have a really difficult job in navigating the safeguarding landscape. And I think one of the things that has evolved, and one of the challenges that's kind of evolved over time, is this peer-on-peer abuse and how we respond to that. And so I just wanted to share some statistics with you kind of that speak to this. So in the autumn in 2022, there was a survey that was carried out, and it was the largest review of children's own feelings of safety in school and beyond. So they surveyed 70,000 pupils across 373 schools and 41 trusts, and they found that the overall feelings of safety, whilst the majority of pupils feel safe in school, around a quarter only felt fairly safe, not very safe, or not safe at all. 1 in 10 pupils reported that they had missed school recently because they felt unsafe at school. And for those pupils that felt unsafe, they said that other pupils were most likely to make them feel unsafe. So there's kind of some, you know, some quite kind of staggering statistics there around actually how young people feel safe in school and what that means for them. Next slide, please. And when we look at peer-on-peer abuse, and obviously there's lots of different categories when we think about peer-on-peer abuse, there was some baseline data that was collected by the Anti-Bullying Alliance. And the data was collected from pupils aged between 5 and 18 years old who attended 208 schools throughout England between November 2021 and February 2022. And the findings found that 24% of pupils report being frequently bullied, and that actually those that are in receipt of free school meals and those with special educational needs were significantly more likely to be frequently bullied. And obviously we know that bullying also takes place in an online setting as well, and so the Office of National Statistics online bullying in England and Wales found that around 1 in 5 10 to 15-year-olds experience at least one type of online bullying behaviour, and that's the equivalent of 764,000 children that are impacted by that, which I think is quite a staggering number. Next slide, please. Also, when we think about peer-on-peer abuse, one of the categories is harmful sexual behaviour, and Ofsted did a review and found they did a review, and the paper was published in June 2021, and within that the girls that responded to the questionnaire indicated that the following types of harmful sexual behaviour had happened a lot or sometimes between people their age, so between people who they go to school with, people in their peer groups, in their circle of friends. And so 92% of them reported that there had been sexist name calling. 81% of them said that they had had rumours shared about their sexual activity. 80% of them said that they had had unwanted or inappropriate comments of a sexual nature. 88% of them had been sent pictures or videos that they did not want to see. 80% of them had been put under pressure to provide sexual images of themselves. 64% of them had had or experienced unwanted touching, and 79% of them had experienced sexual assault of any kind. And I think when we look at some of those figures as well, again, that's quite staggering. And so, you know, I think it's it shows that, you know, schools do have a really, really challenging kind of landscape to navigate with this, and it's not an easy thing to try and respond to and tackle. And so I think whilst this kind of probably seems very doom and gloomy, I think there are lots of things happening. There's lots of momentum happening across the safeguarding sector as a whole, but I guess across the education sector as well, around how we respond to this and how we tackle this. And with that in mind, I am delighted to welcome Comberton Village Collage to share their journey and their story on how they as a school have responded to peer-on-peer abuse and how they are tackling it within their school. So I will hand over to Comberton Village Collage. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Such a great honor to be part of this amazing conference today. So I'm Marielle Burgess. I am the Rights Respecting School Coordinator here at Comberton Village Collage. And myself and my colleague, who I will be handing over a little bit later on this afternoon, are hoping that you find our presentation helpful. So back in December 22, we wrote an article on tackling child-on-child abuse. And today's presentation is really about how, for us, this links extremely well with the work that we do to promote the rights of the child. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of context here, you can see a little bit of data about the sort of school that we are in. We are a very large, diverse and mixed secondary school, as well as sixth form, just about 5 miles outside of Cambridge. We have a large number of students on roll, as you can see, and you can also see here a little bit of data in terms of our pupil premium pupils and our pupils with a EHC plan, as well as our pupils for whom English is an additional language. In terms of our journey through the Rights Respecting School, we started that journey back in 2016 and were very, very delighted last summer to be re-accredited, to gain the re-accreditation at gold level. Next slide, please. So for us, the rights of the child at Comberton are, you know, the language of the right is entirely embedded and is part of the culture and the ethos of the school. Our motto here at Comberton is to be capable, confident and caring. So by the time our young people leave us, whether they leave us after year 11 or after year 13, the aspiration that we have is that those young people are capable, confident and caring and ready for the next journey ahead. And the rights at Comberton are woven through everything we do, as many other schools I know in the UK are as well. It's all in our teaching and learning, and you know, the teaching and learning that we have here at Comberton is centered around the rights. Our partial curriculum, our assemblies, the form time activities we do, again, entirely linked with the rights. And in fact, every week, we link a partial curriculum with a particular article, a particular focus for that particular week. And this is promoted in assemblies and in form time. The rights are also, of course, featuring in all the extracurricular curriculum that we offer here at Comberton, from lunchtime clubs to sports activities and other extracurricular things that we do. And we're also very proud at Comberton to be holding the International School Award, which of course is a great promotion of Article 30, and this is something that we are very proud of, and we've been holding this award for many years now. So through the rights of the child, as many of you have said today, and as we all agree here in the UK, students are, we feel, empowered, they have a voice, and they feel that their voice is heard. And this is something that we feel very, very strongly about here at Comberton. And tackling child-on-child abuse at CVC, again, that was something that we felt very, very strongly about to continue to promote the rights. Next slide, please. So child-on-child abuse, my colleague Jenni Gerling, who I will be handing over to in a few minutes, will say more on that. But of course, we all know what it means. It can involve bullying, physical, sexual violence. It can happen both inside and outside of school or college and online. And for us at Comberton, it's extremely important that we feel that staff need to feel that it's made clear that none of this will be tolerated and that all of this will be challenged. So as the Everyone's Invited scandal and the subsequent Ofsted review 2021 revealed, child-on-child abuse, as we know, and the culture of sexualized behavior and misogyny is very much present in many schools across the UK. Soon after the scandal, we realized that despite our best efforts here at Comberton, and despite the fact that we are a rights respecting school at Gold Awards, our school was no exception. So being a rights respecting school gives us a really useful framework and language to have difficult conversations with pupils and staff and link them to children's rights. I'm now going to be handing over to my colleague Jenni Gerling, who is the designated safeguarding lead at Comberton, and she's going to tell you about the journey that we took at Comberton to tackle child-on-child abuse. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I think the chat was suggesting that maybe I was needing to log on, but fear not, I'm here. It was just a swift movement to the right, and you now have me sat in front of you. So sorry to panic you guys. So really thank you for having us. As Marielle said, it's a real privilege to be here. And when we were meeting to discuss this as a sort of prelim chat, I said, but I could probably talk for hours on this. So I will do my best to just be as close to 10-15 minutes as I can. So next slide, please. So I'm going to pretty much take you through the journey since we began to tackle child-on-child abuse in school. It was really clear following the Everyone's Invited campaign, all schools have a problem. You've got to think it does happen here, not it could happen here. And I think when your mentality is thinking like that, then you're going to start to take action. So we decided, and with links to the RRSA work, it's about the pupils. We've got to start with the pupils. So we surveyed them. The safeguarding team came together. We put something together we felt was pupil friendly, using correct words, terminology, nothing too fancy. We decided to ask them, what do they understand from safeguarding? What do they understand from child-on-child abuse, as it first was peer-on-peer abuse back then? Because if they don't understand what we mean by that, how can we tackle it without them having the full understanding? So we worked through a survey. We also then worked through the results of the survey. We surveyed 1,500 students with fantastic responses, more than 800. And in December 21, so about a month later, we put the survey results together in forms of graphs and visuals for the students, but also staff. So all of the tutor teams, pastoral teams are in assemblies every week. And how we run assemblies here is on a Monday, we start with year 7, working through to Fridays, year 11. So we're hitting not only the pupils, but all the tutor teams, the heads of year, the assistant principals with this data. It felt like you could hear a pin drop in some of these assemblies. And I think what we found was what we knew we would find, but still actually to read it was quite upsetting. So once we delivered the information to the students, we absolutely always make sure we keep the parent body informed, what it is exactly we've said to their children, what it is exactly the children have said to us, and what we all do as that sort of triage, the triangle of parents, students, and the community, what we can all do and come together. So following that, January 22, we need to see what staff feel about this, because it is a behaviour and the child has the right to feel safe in school. And it was clear, and I will move on to what we found on the next slide, but it was very clear that we do have a problem. Some students do not feel safe, and staff and parents needed to have their say too. So more than 380 parental responses, more than half of the parents say we do have a problem. And again, the staff were the same. We had 150 responses, and more than half who took the survey said there is a problem with sexualised behaviour. So what do we do next? We've got this data, we've got this huge issue. We know we need to try to eradicate such behaviour, but actually there's a lot of work to be done. So in January 22, we reached out to the local authority, the PSHE service, and through that we trained 6 key staff in school on using a toolkit, called Safer Corridors toolkit. Now, actually, Safer Corridors, it's fantastic, but we don't want you to think by any means that just meant we focused on safer corridors. This is everywhere in school, absolutely anywhere. But within that toolkit, it provided us, as the 6 staff that were trained, some activities that we could use to include on both staff and pupils, and even reaching out to parent focus groups. So it was really helpful, and I'll move on to a little bit about that shortly again later. What we were trying to do by training staff, by reaching out to pupils, is understand firstly what the problem is, what everybody thinks it looks like, and then tackle with some training. So in March 22, with the help of the toolkit and some of the fantastic activities, we trained absolutely everybody in school. And by that, I mean the site team, our invigilators, our teachers, our TAs, any support staff, whether they're admin based or not. Everybody is going to see a child in the corridor, in the car park, somewhere in school. So we really need to train everybody and give them a virtual tool belt and techniques of what to do if they come across some language that is being used that's inappropriate, or an action, or some form of obvious non-consensual touching, those sorts of things. It's very easy to challenge things like fights or arguments or a smoking or a bus sanction, but actually this is fear of getting it wrong and also not having the confidence as staff to challenge. So as Marielle said, my colleague, we are a gold standard RRSA school. So the language we use to educate and communicate with our pupils is key. We must remember the rights of the child at all times. So when we were thinking about how to roll this training out, and actually staff don't have a lot of time, we appreciate that. But one thing we've asked all staff to do is call it out. So if they are hearing what we would call attitudes and language of our pupils, from catcalling, racial slurs, homophobic language, to a girl being rated out of 10 by a couple of her peers, we want that language to be called out. That language is not acceptable, and that behaviour doesn't match up with the school culture. That word is offensive. Please be mindful and choose another word. It's also not funny. And those key phrases challenge the pupil immediately without it clearly being a non-educational message to them of just telling them off and moving them on their way to get to lesson. Because I think by doing that, we do stop the behaviour, but we're not educating them around why it's not acceptable to speak it that way. So the pupils, after the surveys were completed and looked at, some pupils came forward and wanted to be part of a pupil focus group. That was by far the most powerful thing we did, because it actually allowed brave students to come forward, speak about their experience, and actually then contributed more to the staff training. That's key, because we can use this activity kit, and I've got some examples in front of me to share with you, but they're hypotheticals. What we wanted to know was, what is it that's going on? So we've got the results of the survey, but by having the focus group as well, allowed us to then train staff with real life examples of things that students at our school are reporting as happening here. So what we always try and do at Comberton as well is deliver real statistics. When I do deliver safeguarding training every year, I do not just reel off what the local authority have presented to me. I will look back at the previous year and I will look at what's been reported, what trends we've got, how many concerns came in what year groups, what sort of themes are presenting themselves. And then we try and do some forward planning and forecasting as to support things that we can set up for our students. And it's the same with this. We didn't just take the toolkit as what it was. We actually made it quite personal to our school. One thing that was, I think, took staff and pupils and parents sort of aback was the actual definition of sexual harassment. And I think that's been an absolutely valued part of the training we've done with everybody involved, because I think we think sexual harassment has to be touching. It has to be some form of physical touch onto a peer. But actually, I've got the definition here. And if you violate someone's dignity, make someone feel intimidated, degraded, or humiliated, you're creating a hostile, offensive, or a sexualized environment, you are sexually harassing that person. And that can be by nothing more than something you say, for example, a shout across the social area at somebody else, targeting them with some sexualized language. You've created a very sexualized environment, and that's actually sexual harassment. And I do feel there was just a lack of education, a real lack of understanding about what that meant. And of course, we look at every single scenario of child-on-child abuse in this school in context, and that is so important. We cannot look at a year 7 in the same way as a year 11. It's the same in when we deliver assemblies. It absolutely has to be age appropriate, the right messages, using the data that we got from each of their year groups. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk to you more about the key findings, because I think that's the really helpful part, really. I think when we got the survey results, we absolutely knew we had a problem. I've put there 157 pupils have experienced unwanted sexualised behaviour at school from other pupils. And what I want you to remember is that that's, of course, only those that actually reported this behaviour to us. It's like anything, you know, that will just be the tip of the iceberg. That was fantastic. We were really pleased that pupils were reporting. We've since surveyed again, and that was on the previous slide, just to confirm that the following year, a whole 12 months later. And what was good was that we did see a shift. We actually thought we might see an increase, because we felt the work we've done might improve children's trust in us to speak out, talk about these things, not to feel any be ashamed in anything. So when we saw that they'd actually gone down, we were quite pleased. The reports that were coming in, the figure had decreased. But what's being reported at this school is in front of you. It's the upskirting, the unwanted touching, sharing offensive content, offensive language. But I've highlighted it. It was the lack of response from staff that really was triggering for some students, and particularly in Key Stage 4, which is our year 10 and 11. Students were reporting that it was happening in social areas, buses, corridors and classrooms. So as I say, the Safer Corridors Toolkit, please don't think of it as just corridors and what you do there. That's simply the name of the toolkit itself. And 35% of our staff did not feel confident in challenging this behaviour. So as you can see, that makes it quite tricky for staff to talk to pupils if actually what they're saying, maybe they don't understand what they have to say. So we made sure when we did talk to tutor teams, more specifically in the year, that we gave them the same activity the students had had. And I've got here in front of me, the main activity we used were the headings of, this is an attitude and language, I'm not sure, this is definitely sexual harassment, and this is just banter. And within that, there were 20 scenarios, and staff and pupils at the, in their separate sessions had to put each of the 20 scenarios under which heading they felt it belonged to. What we didn't want to see was any of those scenarios in this is just banter. There were some staff and some pupils that put those scenarios in there as an example of what those scenarios were. Someone commented that a girl looked terrible as she wasn't wearing makeup. Someone pinned a girl's bra strap. On the bus, someone discussed what score out of 10 they would give her another person in their hearing, and they could hear that. And again, I think when we first did this exercise with staff, a few staff sort of went, that's not that bad, that's okay, there's no actual sexualized language there, but actually that's never okay, it's never banter, and it's perception. So, someone could laugh something off, it still doesn't mean that they're accepting of something. So that was a big challenge for us. We also found the challenge of families still using certain language at home, still almost supporting their students with, oh, that's okay, we still use that language, I don't worry that you've been told off for that. What do we do with that? So we're trying to educate not only the pupil but the parents, and we're actually inviting them in for meetings when we come across these types of behaviours. Next slide, please. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of the journey so far. It does not stop there. It's one that will continue and continue. And I should have said on, the previous slide, but one thing we've done when we're thinking through a safeguarding lens, the right of the child, we've taken our safeguarding policy one step further, and we've actually produced our own child-on-child abuse policy. And you may say, well, what's the difference? So the difference being it's 2 pages in our safeguarding policy, very much driven from the local authority, keywords and messages, absolutely important messages, some of which are in keeping children safe in education as well. But it's not personal to our school. And for us to feel that the children's rights, the fact that the child needs to take us seriously, we can really prove to them how serious we are, zero tolerance. We've put together a 7-page document, child-on-child abuse policy. And what's different within that is it clearly outlines how we'll educate our pupils, how we'll call this behaviour out, that it's a zero tolerance, that actually for us, if a child is spoken to about using inappropriate language, for example, we don't like to think of then, so what sanction do we give? Sometimes behaviour is just a reaction and then we give sanctions. It's actually more about changing terminology, not using that word, educating them around a really serious topic that they clearly don't understand. So we talk about a sanction ladder, but that isn't by any way in terms of what we first hit them with. It's more about educating them, but something has to stand on their information, our database, on what they've done. We like then to put the follow-up conversations. We also look at things from a victim perspective. I think that's a huge change in our school. We're no longer thinking alleged perpetrator straight away. We're thinking alleged victim. We're not going to move the victim out of a class. We're going to look to move the perpetrator out of the class, because actually that child has the right to feel safe. And why should they have to be moved when it's something they haven't had any control over? So that's just important for me to mention there to you. So what now? So we're going to continue with this. We're about to survey the students again every November. This will be the number 3. Obviously, we're just completely looking at the shifts, different patterns that are emerging. Then we take another section out of the Safer Corridors toolkit. What can we do next time? What activity can we all do together? Keep talking about it. I did some safeguarding updates only this morning to some invigilators, and it was 30-minute top-up session, but about 4 or 5 of those slides our child on child abuse, the calling out, the calling in, the constant, it's drip feeding. It's not a one-off on training day. Let's remember, everybody, we've got to combat this behaviour. It's in everything we do. We send the RRSA article slides round to tutors every week. We also send these reminders with those. We remind pupils all the time of their rights to feel safe. They can feed into the work that Marielle does with the RRSA, but we also have our school council, we have our safeguarding child focus groups. As I've said, we're going to repeat the surveys. One thing that was brought to our attention recently was it feels like things are happening and things are changing, but we quite often don't get feedback on what happened when I did report that. So that's been a huge focus for us since we've come back in September. We share appropriately, but yes, we fully appreciate that the child has been brave enough to report, so they absolutely need to know when someone was spoken to, who was spoken to, and then they are prepared to actually accept and know that we've done the challenging conversations, but then they'll maybe look out for that behaviour and then report back to us in maybe a week's time as to whether that's improved for them or not. And that was more recently in a year 11 girl reporting some unnecessary touching from a year 11 boy in a PE class, and she didn't want to be known as to who'd said it. So we come at that from an angle of, you have been seen, it has been reported, and then we've checked in with her that she was happy for that to happen. And then we've had that conversation, and then I've asked her to come back and talk to me, and I'll fill her in on how that went, and she can report further things to me. So it is taking it to that next level without thinking, once you've spoken to the alleged perpetrator, that's it, it's all fine now. It's just checking in with your students to see if it's actually made a difference. Safeguarding assemblies every term, really pleased that they're now running. We speak to pupils normally before the half-term week in the October, February and May half-term, and we try to link with themes and time of year. So a week on Monday we've got the police coming in to talk about Halloween and vaping. That's the current themes, but at the end of that assembly I will take to the floor and just do the recaps on child again. So it's new for us to have actual bespoke assemblies on safeguarding matters, so that's a positive move, I think. What other have we got going on? We've got this new slogan called Report It. So we've got the Disrespect Nobody campaign posters that the government put out all round school, but we've actually got our own slogan on there, and Report It, and we've introduced that into assembly. So it's just those constant reminders. We've also, I hope you can see this badge, the two hands, that is the safeguarding team. We all wear this badge on our lanyard without any words, just the visual. This is on everything we do, and if you can see, it's the template on our PowerPoint, the two hands. That's on the posters as well, because we want to create that culture of all staff, all students, all parents knowing who key people in school are. Next slide, please. And I think this is a really lovely slide for me to finish on, because I talked about the Disrespect Nobody campaign posters, and that's great because they're up, they're on all head of year notice boards, they're around school. We've got one in each classroom, so as a child goes through their day they can look and they'll see a different poster with a different message. But these posters were designed by our own pupils, following the activities they did on Is It Banter, all of those scenarios, activities. And that's what students, mainly in years 7, 8 and 9, the years 10s and 11s were less keen to actually produce a poster, but they did get involved in the activity. And this is what came out. And this poster now sits alongside all the Disrespect Nobody posters around school, with the slogan, as I said, Report It, with the hands likes on the badge here, and just reminding students that that hopefully through seeing that we are trying to make them feel safe in school at all times, and we do take this very, very important matter seriously. Thank you so much for listening. That was very wordy, and I feel like I could have probably said a lot more, but I'll now hand you back to my colleague Marielle just to wrap things up. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenni. Yeah, so we really hope, Jenni and I, that this presentation has shown you how the work that we've done on child abuse, it completely links with the fact that we are a rights respecting school. Of course, it's important to realise that we are not complacent, that there is still, you know, we are on a journey to tackle this issue, and that we will continue to work really, really hard to make sure that this continues to be embedded in the culture and the ethos of our school. And that is it from us. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Marielle, Jenni and Sarah for your presentations. It was absolutely wonderful to listen to, very insightful to listen to, and lots of thinking to be done in response to those sessions as well. Just to say, I'm Cathy Allen. I'm one of the senior professional advisors with the Rights Respecting Schools team. And really, we've only got a few minutes left, but I know we've got lots of questions coming in on the Q&A, so we might not be able to get through all of them. But just to reiterate, really, that it's important for us to reflect on these sessions and really consider our own practice. And I think Sarah in that first section really highlighted some surprising statistics around safeguarding and peer-on-peer abuse. So thinking about that and how then that's put into practice at Comberton, and how they wonderfully shared kind of the decision that they took to take that whole school approach, which is fantastic. And it was wonderful to hear how that rights language and that framework is providing support for developing that safeguarding work with your young people at Comberton. So that's wonderful. I know we've shared a definition of sexual harassment in the chat, in the Q&A, which is brilliant. We've also got a few other questions coming in. One maybe to Jenni, if this is all right. Often pupils are, this is a question from the audience, often pupils are not keen to report things because they think it will be obvious where those complaints have come from. Is this something you've come across, and how do you avoid this?
Yeah, and I think that's probably sort of what we feel all the time, and definitely students hold back. I think you've got to create the opportunity for pupils to report. It is like any safeguarding. A pupil may not be ready to disclose, but you've got to provide ways that they can. So what we've tried to do as well is offer ways that they can report without actually having to come to us. So on our website, our homepage, if you look at combertonvc.org, you'll see this badge is on there as a link on the top, and it says concerned about a child. That links you straight through to the safeguarding team. So any pupil, parent, member of the community can speak to us over email rather than coming to a drop-in or to report themselves. How we always word things to the child is, talk to me about the scenario. Let's come together at the end to see how we feel we can take this forward. We may not do anything in that moment. We may not do anything for the next week or so. It's the same when you're offering to inform the police if it's such a serious incident. It's always there. We can raise it in the future, but also that we come in from the angle always of the teacher has observed some behaviour. We would never highlight the individual pupil. Sometimes a pupil then says, but it'll be obvious it's me. Yes, it will. What do we want to do? Do we want to pursue this? I think we should, but actually let's work together and come to the way we'll tackle it ourselves together. If that's all right.
Thank you, Jenni, for that. There's another one. This might be for you as well, Jenni. I'm not sure. There's lots coming through about kind of your presentation. Definitely. Can you share a little bit more about the difference between calling out and calling in?
Yes,
and why both are important to Comberton?
Yeah, and I think when we think of behaviour, calling out, it's actually giving staff different phrases that they can use to call out the behaviour, rather than what we don't want is like a member of staff to arrive on school site to see some behaviour that they know it's child on child abuse or attitudes and language, but we don't want the response of, come on, off you go, get to lesson. That's not helpful. The child at that point needs to understand that that behaviour is not acceptable. The calling out and the calling in technique is actually what we learned from the Safe Corridors toolkit and when we were trained as staff. So it is available to all. It's not a Comberton thing, but we've found there 2 key pieces of information. So when you have said, excuse me, Jenni, that language is not acceptable, that isn't funny, and it doesn't support the school culture and ethos. That's what we want any member of staff in school to say. At that point, if the child is unwilling to give you a name, they're being defiant, that happens, but that happens with any behaviour. So we can only try to combat this behaviour by asking those questions. We have CCTV around school. We have very willing senior staff to look at, if a student is unwilling to give a name, who that child is. If we find out who the child is, we only ask a certain number of staff in school to have the calling in conversation. So we've trained tutors, the heads of year and the safeguarding team. And if in a staff body of nearly 500, that's probably less than about 60 staff. So the key messages on challenging them. Why do you think that someone called you out for that behaviour? What is your understanding of that word? What is your understanding of that situation? We want a conversation with them. We don't want this to feel like it's a heavy telling off and a sanction, because as I said, some of this language is what's been very normalised and commonplace in their own family home. So we're having a conversation with them to help them understand, and actually maybe that child will go home and start challenging their own family members. And one thing I would say is this is a primary school age that we need to start using at these calling out, calling in strategies. I feel we get year 7 here and they're clearly shouting words that they don't know the meaning of, or they're acting in certain ways that they don't understand what it means. So I hope and I think, because I've been in meetings with the Cambridge network heads here, and we're making headway there as well. So it is important that we work with primaries as well.
Yeah. Definitely. One of the questions that came up actually was about the Safer Corridors toolkit. Is that suitable for use in primary schools as well, or is that a secondary resource?
Yeah,
Jenni?
But the one that we delivered to us was secondary, and it was when I spoke at the Cambridge Heads meeting, it was somebody within that group was actually going to be contacting the local authority PSHE service to ask about that exact thing. And so, yeah, absolutely agree that there needs to be support with the delivery of the messages and appropriateness of the messages, but it would be something that I'd be contacting your local authority. I actually challenged the local authority and said, we actually have put in this, if you sort of speak your first strike, if you like, this is going to happen. You're going to have a tutor calling in conversation, then you're going to progress to a head of year conversation, and maybe you're going to have to serve some break times, just because, it is a behaviour. But the educational part is the important part always. Then where do you go when you've sort of got to the end of that and a student may, year 10 by then maybe, still acting in a certain way? So there is, for us, there's a diverse SLIP programme, which is sort of like sexual, legal, pornography, internet company that come and do free workshops one-on-one, taking it that step further. So yeah, that's useful to have as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of those great ideas, and I'm sure lots of people are jotting things down and picking up, and I know we'll share. There are lots more questions in the Q&A, so what we'll do is we'll share those around with Jenni and Marielle and Sarah, and hopefully be able to get you some feedback to everyone who's here at the conference. But thank you all very, very much for your time and for your contributions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're now going to Thank you. We're now going to move on, and we're going to move on to the next session. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Jenni, and she is going to introduce the power of campaigning.